Hey everybody, Mike with Games Played Badly, and today on Session 0, I talk with John from Spiral Dice. I know all you dice goblins out there are probably drooling at the mouth, but these are not the type of dice you're thinking of. Spiral Dice are very unique, and I can't wait for him to explain it. Very, very cool stuff, and the possibilities are literally endless. And by the way, I have another shirt from Gemmed Firefly. Check out gemfirefly.com and use our promo code BADLY15 at checkout for 15% off. And they have a ton of shirts. This shirt is actually from the Dungeon Glitch collection, which is more TTRPG oriented. But there are tons of shirts up there, and they're all fantastic quality. Check them out. In the meantime, let's get chatting with John. That interview starts now. Hey John, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Very good. Thank you for being on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Thanks for making the time.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. This game looks incredibly fun, so I really wanted to have you on. And as we were chatting earlier before Lights, Camera, Action, you're up in Wisconsin?
I am, yeah, Madison, Wisconsin.
Wow, I love Wisconsin. Wisconsin's awesome.
It's pretty cool, and now not cold anymore, which is great.
Yeah.
Once we dig out from under the snow.
Yeah,
it's nice
that definitely
to be
helps. Yeah, one of my favorite places to party is Milwaukee, and then we go over to La Crosse occasionally.
Oh, nice. You do the whole cross Wisconsin. Do you stop in Madison, or do you just...
We unfortunately normally drive through, but now that I know somebody in Madison, I'll contact you the next time I'm coming through.
That's right.
Are you a baseball fan at all?
I was when I was a kid. I'm not a baseball fan anymore. I am aware the Brewers games are pretty fun.
They are, yeah. I'm going to tell you, it's an amazing time up there. Miller Park is home away from home for me.
That's cool. Yeah, I have not been to a game, actually. Not been to a Brewers. I've been to the where we have the Mallards in Madison, which are like minor league. Uh-huh. And so I've gone to a few of those games.
Oh, very cool. Okay. So you have this amazing game, and for all you dice goblins out there, this is not a campaign about dice. This is an actual game. But because I know everyone's like, ooh, new dice. I can't wait. I need like 25 12-sided. So, so John, why don't you tell us more about Spiral Dice?
Yeah, sure. So it's not a campaign. It's not like a artisan dice campaign or a multicolored kind of like polyhedral dice campaign. It is to make dice. Sort of the like central purpose of it is that this is to fund the ability for me to make a bunch of these dice, which are used in a variety of things, including the Sapio game, as well as they can be used by other game designers to inject narrative into their games, and they can be used as GM tools in existing systems in place of things like your D100 rolling on random tables or your D6 rolling on random tables.
Yeah, I saw that. I mean, it's So why don't you tell me about the system itself? Because that was rather unique when I was kind of reading through it.
Yeah, so, I mean, first off with the dice, the basic idea is that they're 12-sided dice. They have 3 types of symbols on them, and they generate not just success and failure, but also complications, either positive or roll. And it's all sort of tied together so that... you have an equal chance of getting a bad or a good complication when you roll them, but if you overperform, you have a little bit more chance of getting a bad complication, kind of a like, you did really well, but a new twist. And if you underperform, you have a little bit more chance of getting a good complication, kind of a consolation prize if you roll poorly. And so that's the dice in themselves. Is basically they're meant to be rolled in a pool. They generate complications. First, application of them is the Sapio system, which is a system I designed. And actually, I've been playing iterations of this system for 10 years now. This is it very much started out as like my kind of homebrew system, and we iterated and we played it, and it evolved. And the end product, the place where it's at now, it kind of required these narrative dice to make it work the way I wanted it to work. It just wasn't going to work with regular dice. And so that's how I came up with the idea for Spiral Dice. The system itself is it's kind of familiar to people who have played a bunch of different systems, but there's also some unique elements to it. So the way you build a character is that you write down their profession, specializations, and some qualities. This is all free form, so you can write down whatever you want. There's some guidelines, so you don't make like a ridiculously powerful character, and you also want to make a character that's non-functional. But right. But you build out your character just by writing down some description of them. And then those descriptions get activated to build up a pool of spiral dice. And then you roll them against targets as you play. And the spiral dice, come in and inject the complications in addition to success and failure. And it all sort of plays off each other as a system. And I guess the final kind of unique thing about the system is I have this action sequences mechanic, which is it covers combat, but it also covers like car chases or collapsing buildings. And the idea there is it plays out similar to like kind of a Marvel movie action scene where somebody is focal for every turn, but everybody else is kind of moving around in the background, and then switches to the next character, and maybe somebody gets like a combo and helps out the other person, and then that is all being every turn you're rolling spiral dice that inject complications and potentially positive benefits. And so it's kind of a chaotic, dynamic action scene that you get out of the action sequences in the system.
Oh, that's very cool. So now, is there a dungeon master involved in this, or a game master, I should say?
Yes. Yeah. So it very much works. Like, I think that people who play really traditional systems are going to find it pretty easy to understand. I mean, some of the mechanics feel a lot more narrative and add narrative. The way you build a character is, writing down these descriptors. But at the end of the day, you build up this number of dice and you roll them. GM will ask you to roll when it's sort of a consequential moment where you might have consequences for failure. And then you follow the path that the dice lead you down afterwards. And it plays out in some sense a lot like a traditional game, but then the end result of the roll has some narrative bent to it.
That's very cool. So how long have you been developing this?
So it's sort of like its first iteration was almost 10 years ago. And that looked a lot more like, do you know Barbarians of Lemuria?
I've heard of it. I've never played it.
So it's sort of a lighter weight system, also a kind of traditional system, lighter weight, no funky dice, no partial successes, but you add your profession to a roll. And that was like the core sort of idea at the beginning of developing Sapio was, okay, you add your profession, but in the beginning there were like attributes and there was this sliding scale that you moved up and down. And, over time, I think this is like version 4 or 5 of the system where I would change one mechanic to get at a little bit closer to something that I wanted. I actually, in iteration 3, tried to pull in Genesis dice. And remember, this is my homebrew system. I think I couldn't actually have in any way sold it if it had Genesis dice involved. Right. But those were like really, my system's really light, and the dice became very big compared to the system because there's quite a lot of them, and you roll a big pool of them, and they have a lot that goes on with them. And so this next iteration was pulling in my own custom dice that were simpler and kind of cleaner about getting at this core idea of how I wanted the flow of the game to be.
Mm-hmm.
And then I tested that for a while, and my friends have run it, and others have run it, and it seems to go off successfully. So now I'm kickstarting it.
Yeah, that sounds cool. From the standpoint of playability, are there going to be some kind of one-shot adventures with this to kind of help guide you through the system?
Yeah, so I actually, as I was like thinking of releasing it, I wanted to do a Kickstarter to make a lot of dice, and I really like the system. I play the system at home, and others have run it, and I was like, well, I guess I could release the system with the dice. And then I asked some people about it, and they were like, well, if you're going to release the system, you kind of need to release like a setting or a one shot. So I'm going to do zombies, which is a flavor of the system that I run a fair amount at home. And the idea behind Sapio is there's a lot of guidance for how you can just tweak it and change the way these elements work. So change what a negative complication looks like, change what a positive twist looks like, such that it really like changes the genre of the game that you're playing. And that's all in the GM guidance of Sapio, but like I'm including the zombie setting so that there is an example of like, okay, this is like all the stuff that you tweak to actually turn it into a full setting that you would play it in. And then over time, I'm hoping to release, more settings so that people can kind of play those stock. But I also have a one shot out on itch right now. It's called NYCND. And it's essentially about a bunch of normal people who are at a party and something goes terribly wrong with reality. Fantasy monsters appear and they have to deal with it. And that's the basic idea.
Yeah, right. Very common occurrence.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, it's very cool.
NYCND is a riot. It's always really fun. So, the way it works is that it has a bunch of collaborative generation questions in it, and it has uses for spare and spiral, the positive and negative complications. And that's most of the bones of it. It kind of like sets you up with a few questions and then says go. It has some rules on the GM side for them generating threats for you to encounter as you navigate it. But it's 2 pages of text, and then if you play that with Sapio, then you've got everything you need to play the game. And I kind of have a plan, or I think it's pretty reasonable for me to keep kind of churning out these one shots. The full setting supplements, like I play Sapio for long campaigns. I play it for short one shots, but the one shots are nice because you can really like jump into the system, see what it's about. It delivers a different experience with each flavor, and so you can just see kind of how adaptable and flexible it is when you play it in one of the one shots. So I have other ones kind of bumping around in my head that I'm thinking of adding to the set. So
now, from the standpoint of using the dice, you had briefly touched on kind of like, to me, it kind of falls into like the critical fails, the critical hits tables, kind of some random encounter stuff. How does that work? I mean, so you mentioned that the dice have different symbols on them, obviously. And there's a positive, kind of the positive die and the negative die, yeah?
There's just one die type, but okay. Yeah, the positive symbol and the negative symbol that offset each other. Yeah.
Okay. So, and then you basically end up, when you roll them all, are you offsetting opposite symbols?
Yeah, so the way it works is that, you set a target number. So the GM will say, it's target between 1 and 5. And then a player will roll between 1 and 6 dice. And there are star symbols on them. You can see them there. Right. There's little star symbols on them, and the stars count. Those are hits, and so you need a number of hits equal to the target number. But then the Y-shaped guys are spare, and those offset with the spirals. And, between the two of them, spare are the positive complications, the spirals are the negative complications. When you get a spare, you get to say kind of what your bonus thing is that you get out of the roll. I think of that like in Powered by the Apocalypse games, it's maybe referred to as crossing the line, but it's kind of like a scenery pull or like fortunate circumstances, right? Maybe you fail and you get like knocked over, but then you see there's the crowbar on the ground next to you, and you're
Right.
like, oh man, got that, and then you stand up and you're ready to go. And more spare, you get a bigger, better thing. Maybe your buddy shows up. And there's guidance in there's a list of things that you can do. And then spiral is the opposite direction, where the GM activates some unforeseen complication that goes along with whatever it is you did, whether you succeeded or failed. So that's like a standard roll, right? Is that you roll, you try to beat the target, and maybe something else good happens or something else bad happens. But the way that the generation rules work for like creating things is, say the players are like, or the characters are looking for a campsite, and you as the GM, are not sure what you want to give them. I mean, it's similar for like a weapon or an NPC, some random thing shows up that you hadn't fully planned. What you do is you just pick up 3 spiral dice and then you roll them. And you offset spare and spiral the same way. Mm-hmm. And if you get 2 hits, that's it's like an average thing, right? So you say like, okay, you're looking for a campsite, you find a pretty good place. Like, it's not going to be like sheltered from the rain, but it's going to be like, it's a clearing and there's a place to make a fire. But on top of that, there's the spare and spiral. And those, if you remember, are the likelihood is tied a little bit to how well you do. Mm-hmm. So what happens is, you make that campsite, maybe they get 4 hits, and it's like a gorgeous campsite that's sheltered, right, away from the rain, and like the people that were pursuing them, no way they're going to find them, but they get 2 spiral. And then that campsite, maybe there's a bear mm-hmm. that actually lives there. And is coming home later that night, or maybe there's an NPC who seems friendly, but is actually not so friendly. Mm-hmm. And then on the other side, right, they if they get spare, then maybe like there's some herbs there that they could harvest to make a potion, or there's an actually friendly NPC who has some like information for them or can help them. So what it does is it's very good for, my friend used to do this where he'd do the high-low D100 roll mm-hmm. that you see GMs do, where they're like, oh, is it good or bad? Sort of roll it, right? It does the good or bad really well, but in kind of a nuanced way, where you as the GM don't have to decide how mean you're going to be. You can just like roll it, and then you're like, oh, I get to be really nice this time, or ooh, I can do something kind of wicked.
Right.
And that's it. It doesn't necessarily add any special ability to you as a GM, mm-hmm. but it gives you a framework to like throw a random thing out and feel like, look, I let the dice decide for me.
Right. I'm not a complete tool. You guys got a bunch of spirals, right. And here you go.
Yeah.
I like that. That's really cool. And it's funny because as you're talking, I'm immediately thinking about how would I use this? Oh yeah, okay, I could do that. I could do this. I mean, it makes complete sense. It's like there is I talked to somebody who does a solo role play, podcast, and he turned me on to somebody who actually uses something called, is it the Mistra system, or I can't remember exactly what it is, but it's basically everything that you need to do is random. And so you're rolling, and it's very vague stuff. Like, okay, I'm going to open this door, and you roll, and it's like, there's something behind there that's not very friendly, or there's something back there. And so it actually randomly guides you through everything, helps you create it because it inspires you.
Right, exactly. Yeah, so I play, do you know Ironsworn? Mm-mm. Well, it's a popular solo RPG right now, and it's great. I am not as familiar with solo RPGs, and the first time I think that I started like kind of shopping this idea around the forum, somebody was like, "Oh, that looks really cool. You can make a really good solo RPG with that." And my perspective is, I'm going to put these dice out there.
Right.
I think that a common criticism of custom dice is like, well, are there going to be enough of them? Am I going to be able to get more of them? Are they going to be expensive? And the whole idea is I want to make them non-expensive and make it so there's enough of them out there that people can just spin on them and figure out what they, what they want to do. Every game designer that actually has like picked one up or like actually like started looking at them, like I'll talk idly with people and they'll be like, oh cool, custom dice, whatever. But if I start talking about the mechanics of them and they start actually thinking about the mechanics of them, they're usually like, oh, there's like some things I could do with these. And solo RPGs are something that I'm not that familiar with, but it sounds like they could really be powerful for generating story for a solo player.
Yeah, I think the possibilities are endless.
Yeah, for sure. I'm also of the perspective that like, Sapio is a great system. I've playtested a lot, played it a lot. Other people have run it. It's really fun to play. If the dice do catch on and people start designing with them, I guarantee you it is not the best thing that will be made with the dice. I just know it is because there are better designers out there than me who will see this and I understand the mathematics of them and I've tuned them very specifically to do something cool around narrative. And I can fit into a lot of different narratives that aren't my game.
Right. Well, that's very cool. So, I mean, you have a Kickstarter running right now, correct?
That's right. Yep.
Oh, man.
It is Spiral Dice Kickstarter.
I will, everyone look down below. I'll make sure I link to the Kickstarter so that way you can get there and buy these fabulous dice. I already backed them, so you better get with the program, people.
Right. I think our next stretch goal is another color, so, hop on board so we can get another color.
Dice Goblins Unite, new colors. Well, John, that sounds fantastic. I can't wait. I'm really interested to see what people create with them as well, because I think, as you said, they're a great tool to be used in so many different ways.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm going to send out a survey at the end of the Kickstarter. I can't survey the backers until the Kickstarter closes, but I do I want to sneak in that question of like, well, what are you gonna use them for? And the reason for that is that long term, I want to devote my efforts to supporting whatever it is generally people are doing. Like, if every single person came back and said, I'm going to play Sapio, I have my own idea of a system I want to make, then I'm going to focus on the Spiral Dice Hacker's Guide that I have and that I'm, putting as part of the Kickstarter. And that's sort of just a manual for like, here's the probabilities in the dice, here's some ways you could use them, here's like a lot of, how they could fit into a variety of different things that'll help people get a head start on using them. But anyway, I sent this question to my to my backers in the last update and asked them to message me with stuff they could use the dice or stuff they were thinking of using the dice for, and only like a few people messaged me. But one of the backers said, well, I play a lot of 5e, and I was thinking, okay, these would be really cool to integrate into 5e for some kinds of skill checks. And then I listened to your stream where you played NYC and D, and that sounded really cool. And so I think like it would be really cool to learn to play Sapio. But then I was thinking about it, and I was like, well, but maybe I also want to make a wholly different system if you can make a whole system out of this. And I was like, that's exactly what I want people to do. Exactly how I want them to see these things is, they're cool, they run well, they're also tools for people to use.
Right. Yeah, I'm going to be really curious. Hopefully, after the Kickstarter and once people get back to you, you can kind of document or share what people are doing with them, because I think it'd be fascinating.
Oh yeah, definitely. And I actually, I have space. So I have a website, spiraldice.com, and I'm going to have space there for other creators to use the dice to put up their stuff eventually,
cool.
if that's it's kind of like, oh, I have a blank page that people could put their stuff on. But like, I am committed in the future to supporting people who are using these for their own purposes.
That sounds fantastic.
I'm running a Generations game right now, and the idea is the players play as characters of one generation, and they show up, they confront a crisis. It's all within the same town across generations, and when the crisis is done, they all get a certain number of dice based on whether they furthered their family line and whether they helped against the crisis. And there's like a special, only one person gets the I helped the most against the crisis die, and only one person gets the I helped my family line the most die. And then they roll, and the result is what place their family is in, multiple generations down the road. And then we narrate the evolution in between. Okay. But the Spare and Spiral are each individual, so you can offset them as a player if you want to minimize your stuff, but you don't have to, and each one is an individual opportunity or threat to your family line. And the player who rolled gets to choose the opportunities, and the other players get to choose the threats. And so it creates like and because you kind of have a higher chance of getting threats the better you perform. Basically, like, you'll get people who have, my family is like doing this, but then it's like beset on all sides by all these issues, and so it's a cool dynamic between generations.
Yeah, it's kind of like collaborative world building.
Oh, yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's really cool. Well, John, I'm looking forward to seeing where the Kickstarter goes. You guys are doing really well already. Again, I did back it, so I can't wait to get the dice and everything, because I want to see what I can do with them. For everyone who's watching, this looks like a great tool for DMs, kind of across the board. Doesn't matter what system you play. I'm really looking forward to trying to. Again, as you're talking, it's almost impossible for me to not think about all the fun stuff I want to do with them.
Great.
But I'll link to the Kickstarter below. And John, it was awesome having you on, and I wish you the best of luck, and let me know if there's anything I can do to help.
Thank you, Mike. Yeah, it was great being on. Thanks for the interview.
Not a problem.